The login activity class is created for user login selection, which extends the custom activity class. Custom activity class is our common class, and it is the parent class for all of our activity classes. The constant touch is defined in this class so that all other classes can use this single instance. Override the onCreate method of activity so that we can call the setUpActionBar method. SetUpActionBar method is used to set up common action bar features for our app. In this method, we defined and set the various properties of action bar like its display logo and background. We have also created a setClick method to provide common interface for setting onClickListener to a view by passing viewID in method's argument. Our custom class also implements onClickListener so that other child activity classes do not need to implement it again. We created a setTouchAndClick method to provide a common way to set both touch and click listeners to a single view. The class touchEffect is used to provide alpha touch effect to a view so that a user can get a feel of touch. This class simply implements the onTouchListener interface and overrides its onTouch method. Inside the onTouch method, which is called when a touch view is happening, we have extracted the background drawable of a view to set the alpha of that drawable. On an action down event, we set the alpha to 150 so that it will fade the background, and on action up, or action cancel, we set the alpha to 255 to remove the alpha effect. Now back to our login class. In the onCreate method of this class, we have initialized the views and set the required listeners to button views. Inside the onClick method, we have compared the ID of view, which is clicked, and if the view is clicked is register button, then we have just started the register activity. If the view that is clicked is the login button, then we first got the username and password values from edit texts and prompted the user if either of these fields are empty. For showing alert dialogues, we have created a utils class to hold various utility methods so that we do not need to write common code each time. In this class, we created a few showDialog methods. Each method takes a different kind of argument, and we can use one of them as we need. We have also created show keyboard and hide keyboard methods in this class. It is common to need to show or hide the keyboard. Now back to the login class. Here comes the actual use of the Parse SDK. We called the login background method of Parse user class, which comes with the Parse SDK. It passes the username, password, and a login callback to the arguments of this method. This method is used to send the login request to Parse backend for verifying the user's login details. When this method finishes its execution, it calls the done method of the login callback interface that we passed in the argument. With this done method, it passes the Parse user object and Parse exception object in its arguments. If the request is successful and the user login details are correct, Parse user object will never be null, and so in this case, we simply finish the login and start our next activity class. If the request is unsuccessful, it may be due to network connectivity or the login details are wrong. The error will be returned using the parse exception argument, so in this case we simply display the alert dialog with the error message returned by parse. Now let's take a look into our register activity class. We have declared and initialized the required view components like edit text inside the onCreate method. Inside the onClick method, we first get the username, password, and email values from edit texts, and prompt the user if any of these fields are empty. For registering the user using Parse, we first create Parse user objects with the username, password, and email values. Then we called the signup in background method of the Parse user class. This comes with the Parse SDK, and it passes the username, password, email, and a signup callback in the arguments. When this method finishes its execution, it calls the done method of the signup callback interface that we passed in the argument. With the done method, it passes the Parse exception objects in the argument. If the request is successful, then the parse exception object will be null. So in this case, we can simply finish the register activity and start the next activity class. If the request is unsuccessful, it may be due to network connectivity or the username or email already exists on the Parse server database. The error will be returned using the parse exception argument. In this case, we simply display the alert dialog with the error message returned by Parse. After the successful login or sign-up, we launch the user list activity class, which shows all of the registered users of the app with their online status. We declare an array list of parse user objects to hold all of the users except the login user. We also define a public parse object which represents the current login user. Inside the onCreate method, we first set the action bar's back option disabled. This is the topmost activity. We also call the update user method with a true value in the argument inside onCreate. The update status method is used to set an online status of the user. It takes a Boolean argument for online/offline status and updates the status at Parse backend by setting the value of the online field. It then calls the SaveEventually method of parseUser to save the status. Inside onDestroy, we call the updateStatus method again, but with the online flag as false. In onResume, we call the loadUserList method, which loads the list of all of the users from the Parse database. In this method, we simply call the Parse SDK methods to load the list. We first got the Parse query object, and then we call the where_not_equal_to method to set where condition. It finds all users whose username is not equal to the username of the logged in user. We then call the findInBackground method. It does the actual job of finding records from the Parse database. Once it completes, it invokes the done method of the find callback interface that we passed in the argument. If the request is successful, then the list of parse user objects will never be null. In this case, we set the adapter to our list view. We also set the onItemClickListener for list view so that we can start our main chat activity when the user taps on any item in the list. We are passing the username of the selected user with the intent. If the request is unsuccessful, it may be due to the network connectivity. The error will be returned using the parse exception argument. In this case, we display the alert dialog with the error message returned by parse. The user adapter class is the adapter class for our list view. It extends the base adapter class and overrides the required methods. In the getView method, we are simply using a single text view that shows the username and the user's online status by setting the left drawable icon in this text view.